Everybody, and no matter what job they have or what profession they're in, will face crisis, will face stress. And certainly in my NASA career, it is on the leading edge of human spaceflight travel and a lot of travel to distant planets. So there's a lot of pushing state of the art every day. And within that, you have to have trust with your coworker. The leadership has to be able to not only trust the employees, but also empower them to be able to do their job in times of when we're not together, when we're separate, when we're doing things remotely and anything else, and hold each other accountable that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And so while we're in a pandemic right now, there's actually something that has been trained, certainly within the federal workforce, and I'm sure industry as well, to prepare for such things. But two or three instances in my career came up. One being the most severe that you cannot predict was Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, where I was the chief operating officer of the Michoud Assembly Facility. I started on a Monday, was literally my first day there. And that Friday, there was a storm called Katrina coming. Let me see the emergency plan. Well, the emergency plan may be a guide, but it basically goes out the window, and you have to go back to what your gut's telling you to do, what your coworkers can do, and let them do their job in a safe and efficient manner. And then sadly, also, we had to deal with two losses of crew with Challenger and Columbia. And although it was at the beginning of my career for Challenger, Columbia was certainly in the dead part of my career, in the middle of my career, I should say. And you know, those are really tough times that you have to be able to concentrate on what data's saying, what professionals are saying, and what conclusions need to be had to make sure something like that never happens again. So to think that someone's not going to be in a stressful job at one point in their career, no matter what career is, it's kind of a fallacy. You just need to feel confident in yourself. And then certainly if you're in leadership, you want to be clear, you want to be concise, and you want to be consistent when you're talking to the workforce, because they're looking for leadership to be able to state the bounds from which they can operate in, and then let them do their thing.
All of a sudden, everything goes in a different direction than what you expected. I mean, you came into that first job and all of a sudden you had Katrina. We're in that challenge right now, and what I'm noticing is with COVID and being sheltered in place, the laws are not up to date, and the rules, you know, we keep changing, and different states have different rules and whatnot. And with regards to business, it's difficult because we've never been in this situation, and therefore the laws have not caught up. And in your particular case with Katrina, whatever was in place, there were some times where you probably had to make a tough decision, and maybe the policy wasn't in place. You know, right now, all of a sudden, everybody is, or most people are still working from home. Many companies did not have the policies for this, so they weren't really sure how to deal with their employees when they're at home. And this has proven to be a very, very difficult time for some companies. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
True. Yeah. I mean, besides the laws, which obviously we elect people to do, and hopefully they can amend those over time. But I mean, from my perspective, working in private industry now for the past 5 years, I think the industry certainly has capability to be able to function without missing too much of a beat. And you know, as a representative of a small business, I think it may be easier for small businesses to adjust to changing times, because if you don't change in a small business, you're basically dying. So, you know, this is another challenge for us as a company, but I'd say from an industry perspective, and now from a federal government, maybe just a little bit slower to react, but the technology is there. It's been there for a while to be able to embrace and empower people to do so. Basically, what's stopping us, in my opinion, is I'd say leaders that are afraid to maybe embrace the new technology. And technology is good for its own sake, and you can't make it the end all and do all, but you can't be afraid to embrace new ways of doing business in order to get your job done. And that's where it comes down to leaders not being afraid or brave enough to be able to trust that the workforce, the people that we've hired to do their job are doing their job no matter where they are. And you also have to be brave enough as a leader to be able to reach out and help someone that you see struggling without holding their hand every step of the way, because that's certainly a form of leadership. Also, on the other end of it, you have to be in touch with as much of the chain of command as you can to understand where people may be heading for a cliff. And your job as a leader is to catch those folks before they go over the edge. So it's kind of a good balancing act. And to me, as a leader in industry and anywhere you are in leadership, this is yet another opportunity for you to grow as a leader with this pandemic, as bad as it is. You just have to be brave enough to not get sucked in. Diversity of thought is the highest level of diversity. So if that is well as a characteristic of an organization, to me, it matters not where you are locally, physically, location-wise. It's everybody feels empowered they could speak up and not feel like they're going to get shot down with perspectives that they may have. And that's when an organization gets in trouble.
And what you might find is actually that somebody that within your organization that you might not have given that task to might actually come up with another way of solving an issue that right now is on your table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, from my perspective in personal experience as a leader, first as as an engineer, then a project engineer, then a project manager, then a program manager, then a senior executive in the government, and now an executive vice president in industry. I can tell you firsthand, because I was guilty of it until I understood how powerful it is. But I've seen so many leaders that can't do one basic thing, and that's listen. It seems natural to people, but I've seen so many people that are in leadership positions, and me being included, that sometimes when people ask you for advice, they're not asking you to give the advice. They just want you to listen and not cut them off halfway through their explanation and say, yes, I've been there, done that. Here's what you need to do. Because sometimes there's a different way to do things. And yes, also when people put things on the table, it's the responsibility of the organization to give them feedback as to, yes, we can do that right now, great idea, or no, we tried that before, but if technology's there, we can do it now differently. And I gotta tell you, the folks that are coming out of college now, be it in undergraduate and graduate programs and PhDs, I mean, they are some of the most wonderfully trained people that I've seen in my career. And what technology that's happening now in big data, data analytics, and artificial intelligence is really helping transform the industry. So the new normal post-pandemic is going to be it. There's no turning back at this point. And if a company cannot adjust or a workforce can't adjust to it, I think it's a limited time for that organization to exist. The days of sitting around a big mahogany table with a bunch of people who look the same, in my opinion, are gone. I'll tell you what happens in pandemics if an organization hadn't already seen who their high performers are, or who their good managers are, good leaders are, per se. These kind of things draw people out. And what I see far too many times, besides leaders that can't listen and fail, are leaders that lead, especially when dysfunction happens or something external to an organization happens, and they default to a wrong way to lead, which is that three-letter word called ego. And that's a failure as well, waiting to happen. And so what happens is organizations have to put people in positions of strength, is what I call them. So not to kid ourselves and kid themselves that you have an expectations that they'll never meet. So it's best to have the hard conversations to put the people in positions where they will thrive. So you can be a high performing organization instead of sweeping somebody under the rug because, well, that's just the way they've been and they're never going to change. And that's where, again, leaders have to be bold enough to be able to embrace change. And you can't predict it in a lot of ways, but you have to be prepared for it.
They may end up holding other people back that can actually do the job because they're fearful that it will be obvious that they can't do it. So incentives are really important, and giving that support to the leaders and to those managers and to those employees at this time to say it's okay to come forward and say, I don't know,
Yes,
going
right.
through uncertain times.
Yeah, and right. And again, if people are afraid not to address the problem, people are ignoring the fact that, the workforce, they are very smart, and they can see where the problem is, whether you want to admit it or not. So do the brave thing of addressing the problem, because the workforce more than likely already knows it. People want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to contribute in areas where they're most happy doing so. So give them the jobs that hopefully your company can offer for them, to let them grow, stretch them professionally where you can. But in the end, be as clear as you can from a leadership, as concise as you can. They don't want to see 400 PowerPoint charts every second week from leadership. And let them do their thing. And in the end, at the end of a performance year, hold them accountable. And you ought to be able to be prepared to let them hold you accountable as well.
They will feel more valuable and more connected. That's
They
really
won't jump to the conclusion of, what's the point? Well, why do I keep doing this week in and week out when nobody explains to me how this fits in the bigger picture? And then there are some companies that is all they will ever do, is that every week to week. And that's certainly successful companies do that all the time in manufacturing. So I'm not talking about every company needs to do that, but in general, if people understand from leadership what's the clear and concise goals and how do they fit in the bigger picture, I think that's a huge element of happiness for employees.
And happiness is important, especially when you're sheltered in place and this is all that you're doing. So
That's right.
You really have to love your job and be happy, because if we're not, we're gonna have some issues.
Right. Not only love your job, but be back in touch and love your family. That you're now sharing your home and workforce, so it's kind of hard to separate your office from your work and home. Versus most of us go home and okay, you can kind of separate, work's over. But these days, you get up and you walk downstairs or walk across the house and you're in your office, and then it's kind of hard to separate these days. But that's what again I think separates organizations that are prepared for the future versus those that are sitting around waiting for things to happen and they become victims of it.
Well, and that's a really important point. I've seen that some companies are actually really thriving right now and have decided that their workforce is going to permanently stay home. I think Siemens was one of those that just recently announced that they're not going to be returning to the office. May actually, in the long run, prove to be more successful.
Yes, no, I agree, and certainly working from home is not prescribed for every company, because every company has different missions to get done. That if you're running retail businesses, you can certainly do certain things online, but people have to physically go to work, and those are the true heroes that are frontline workers, besides the hospital workers and other folks that are keeping our quality of life going. While we're either working from home or going into the office when we need to, but it's not for everybody, but you need to be able to adjust your working model basically to be able to survive and thrive basically.
You can't put everybody in the same bucket, because depending on their job, depending on the industry, and depending obviously on which generation you're dealing with, there are different challenges. And for a leader to understand that and ascertain exactly what each employee needs and what their team needs to become stronger, given all the dynamics, it's a difficult time.
Right. No, and that's where I learned a lot from the folks that we've hired, and when I was within NASA, I mean, hiring brilliant young minds to come in to change the rules, if you will, with new technologies that certainly didn't exist when I was coming up through high school and college. And again, you have to be courageous as a leader to at least evaluate it instead of just dismissing it offhand. And that's where you have to have the freedom and power and embracing that diversity of thought, where you have the same people that look the same in a room, you're gonna probably be okay because it's based on experience. But if you don't open that up to others that are either younger or from different locations or different backgrounds, you're not going to get to a great level in an organization. And like I said, for the folks that are coming out now, they're really good with the iPhones and the Androids and everything like that, and they really don't even need an office. So what a leader has to be careful of is not assuming that people can't work from home, and they hear one bad case out of 500 employees that someone is abusing the system. Well, you need to address that person, and don't automatically divert back to where we were and cripple the organization because one person is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and hold that person accountable, but trust and empower the rest to continue on with what they're doing in this new normal.
I agree. I think that's a really important point.
It's important to have these lecture series, these seminars, these collaboration opportunities, because in a lot of ways, the pandemic has made the world even smaller. I mean, it was already becoming smaller with the technology, but now, because people don't go to a quote office, maybe their mindset is such that, well, if I'm not in an office, the whole world now is my office. And through these technologies that we're talking now, through Zoom and Skype and others, you can reach to colleagues across the globe more easily and more adaptable, because you're working from home and you have to do it every day. So what's the point about, it's easier to walk down the hall and talk to a colleague, but now that you're working from home in a lot of ways, okay, well, let's set up a Zoom call and we're talking to somebody on the other side of the world who has, guess what, the same exact challenges, the same problems that we have in the United States, but maybe they've come up with a different solution. So we shouldn't be afraid to collaborate, not only within the confines of our workforce in the U.S., but also from across the world. And that's why I think it's really important and exciting that you're having this particular seminar.